All right, welcome to the what I think is going to be the best, most influential event that we have here at TechNet this week. So I have a team of distinguished individuals with me to answer whatever questions you have with regard to cyber, signal, electronic warfare, training, education, the way the Army is going. I'm going to start off with just doing a couple of introductions. I'll start with me. I'm Neil Hersey. I'm the Commanding General for the Cyber Center of Excellence in Fort Gordon. I'm also the Senior Commander at Fort Gordon. I've been in that position for about 60 days now. I took over on the 6th of June of this year. Prior to that, I had the honor and privilege of being the Commandant for the U.S. Army Cyber School, its newest school and newest branch, for about 2 years before that. And my time before that was in the operational force doing a lot of different things. So great honor to be up here. Looking forward to having a dialogue with you all. And let me pass it over to Brigadier General Chris Eubank.
Hey, good afternoon, Brigadier General Chris Eubank. I'm the Deputy Commanding General for Signal for the Cyber Center of Excellence, the 39th Chief of Signal, and the Commandant of Signal School. So all things Signal here at Fort Gordon. Prior to this assignment, I was the AFCOM J6, and prior to that, a lot of time in the SOF community. I look forward to your questions and our dialogue. Thanks.
Hey team, my name's Dave May. Thank you for giving up your lunch hour to spend some time with us today. So I have two roles within the Cyber Center of Excellence. I'm General Hersey's Senior Advisor, but I wasn't doing such a great job in that role. So he asked me to serve as the Acting Director for the Capabilities Development Integration Directorate. As you all probably know, we have two main missions within the Cyber Center: educate and train the world's finest signal, cyber, and electronic warfare soldiers. We also have a mission to develop .MLPF solutions for the future force. And I do that as the CDID Director. So we develop the concepts, we do all the experimentation, we write the requirements, we do the force packages for our future force in signal, cyber, and electronic warfare. I look forward to your questions.
So my name's Todd Boudreau. Since the stand-up of the Cyber School, I've been blessed to be the Deputy Commandant. Prior to that, I was the Director of the Office Chief of Signal, and prior to that, I was blessed to be able to serve over 3 decades in the Army as a communicator. So I too look forward to all your questions.
Okay, so I know you all have plenty of questions for us, but let me get the juices flowing by a question out to the group, and I'll let each one of our panel members provide their perspective, and then we'll go from there. We've got a microphone up here, and we'll make sure that microphone gets to you so we can clearly understand your question, and we can also everyone else can hear and understand your question as well. So my first question to the group is, how are we changing the force to meet the demands of multi-domain operations? So, Chris, I'll start with you.
So the biggest thing we're doing is changing the way we train and educate signal soldiers to meet future requirements and needs. So we're moving away from green boxes and moving towards theory and concept, so that we're not tied to an individual box or tool. That way, depending on where we are in 2028, we can adapt and solve problems, multidiscipline problems in the future. The way we're getting after that from the schoolhouse is every soldier that comes into Fort Gordon as a signal soldier today goes to 4 weeks of IP foundational training. So they learn the OSI model. They actually look, I know it's going to sound funny, but they look at a desktop. They understand the inner workings of a computer. They learn how to subnet, make cables, router, switch, print, wireless access points. And they have to put all that together and make the network work before they leave and move on to their MOS producing course. That's to level set everybody across the regiment. And so that's how we're getting after creating multidiscipline, multi-faceted signal soldiers for the future to keep up with industry. I'll pass it off to Mr. May.
Thanks. So last year during TechNet, I talked a little bit about electronic warfare and integrated formations that we are building for the Army. And for those of you who are here, you remember that I said that we do not have any organic electronic attack capability across echelon for the Army. So let me give you a quick update. So we pushed a FDU forward to the Army for our CEMA sections. That's Force Design Update, for those of you who don't know. That has been approved, so we are going to build CEMA sections at every echelon at the staff level, from BCT all the way up to theater. And they will plan, synchronize, and integrate cyberspace and electronic warfare activities for the commander. We've already started experimenting with that today. At the BCT level, we're going to build electronic warfare platoons into the military intelligence company. They're going to be integrated with our intelligence brethren. We experimented with that again. So we created a CEMA section and an EW platoon with 2-2 Striker out at Fort Lewis. And we've been playing around with that concept for about a year now, working through the .MOPF concept. That force design is also approved. The Army has recognized the need for electronic warfare at the division level. And we, again, are working with our intelligence brethren to create an IEW battalion at the division. That force design is working its way through the building today. We have an EW company also going in at the corps level. And again, with our intelligence teammates, that'll be an IEW formation, a battalion at the corps. We introduced a new concept called IQs, Intelligence, Cyber, Electronic Warfare, Space, and Signal. It's a detachment today. The Army approved a pilot of 199 folks, again, testing it out at Fort Lewis at JBLM. We played around with it at JWA this past year. We've kitted them out. We've actually stood up the pilot. We're learning a lot of things from that organization. So much so that the Chief of Staff of the Army said, I want another one in Europe. So we're going to create a second detachment out in Europe in the near future. And then the last formation I talked to you about was the Cyber Warfare Support Battalion. We have approval for a headquarters and 4 expeditionary CEMA teams, which we're going to grow out to a total of 8, a 627-person battalion to deliver cyberspace capabilities from the tactical edge all the way up to the theater. We actually stood that battalion up a couple months ago. We've already got 30 folks, and we're moving that out. So subject to your questions. Over to you, Todd.
Great. So 5 years ago today, there was a number of us up at Fort Meade still sitting in a room with pizza and Red Bulls being slid under the door as we're coming up with the Army's answer to the Cyber Mission Force. General Fogarty came down. We briefed him the first week of September. 3 weeks later, we were in General Odinero's office briefing him. This is the plan for the Army to be able to put together its Cyber Mission Force. And he accepted that and told us to move out and make that happen. So he told us we wouldn't get the first students until 2016. He fibbed. In 2015, we had the first new lieutenant show up. And so without instructors and without a lot of curriculum put together, we did some bold and audacious things like crowdsourcing our curriculum from the operational force. And very quickly, we stood up the school and was able to get started. The first bullet class, or basic officer leader class, had 15 lieutenants in it. We graduated about 30 soldiers that year. Here we are, almost not quite 5 years later, and we'll graduate about 1,500, probably between 2,000 and 2,500 next year. So rapid growth and rapid integration. And one thing that we haven't left is that operational force's ability to come in and recommended changes to our curriculum. We stay snap linked to them while never stepping away from the standards that U.S. Cybercom requires. On the electronic warfare side, we also, when we stood the school up, took responsibility for electronic warfare. We kind of assessed it over about a year and a half while we were getting the cyber warfare stood up, and then we moved forward on what we're going to do for electronic warfare. One of the things that we saw is that the Army rarely ran out of airspace and timing at a certain level. We were very focused on a very important counter-IED mission and the counterinsurgency mission, and they did that very, very well. But looking at what could be over the horizon with large-scale ground combat operations, we have completely revamped the electronic warfare training. Last Monday, we started the Army's first 17 Echo Advanced Individual Training course, meaning we're taking them right off the street. We revamped that from a 9-week planner's course to a 28-week course that will produce electronic warfare operators that have the knowledge and skills both in the physics, the mathematics of how radio wave propagation works in electronic warfare, and then applying the capabilities that the PMs are providing to be able to then project that in force in those units that were just spoken of. And so lots of things to ensure that we have the cyberspace domain and the electromagnetic spectrum covered with Army operators as part of a whole multi-domain concept that moves forward. Sir?
Thank you. All right, so let me open it up to questions, and if you don't have any, I've got a couple more to ask. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, Sydney. Okay.
While journalists are not as fit as soldiers, I think a 15-foot walk is within my capabilities. Sidney Friedberg, breaking in defense, professional asker of impertinent questions, for those of you who don't know me. A lot of this is very new. There's a lot of force structure being created. The training pipeline is cramping up. GAO just came out with a report, last week saying, hey, CWSB is only manned, less than 20%. I2Qs is manned somewhere around 80%. And therefore do more assessment, was always the GAO answer to everything. But, what is the challenge of getting the personnel trained and the force structure, to fill the new force structure? And, it's already been created or already been approved. And then the next wave, which General Fogarty just announced yesterday, is there's a proposal in the works to expand this thing they haven't already finished building into an information warfare force with I/O planners and a wider range of missions. So, he's already like 2 phases ahead of where the actual force structure is. How do you catch up in that race and get enough of these highly skilled people out to first the SEMA echelons you're creating, and then the information warfare at echelon that those will become?
So thank you for the question, Sydney. Always easy questions, right? So one, to the point, the Army has recognized the urgency of how important it is to get after this, and has made decisions ahead of some of the training being stood up to start setting the conditions so we can build these formations. Simultaneously, we've been working for a while on the planning to, 1, build the curriculum, and 2, outfit our facilities to be able to build the soldiers, civilians. We also do joint training provide those with the skill sets necessary to start manning these formations, understanding that it is similar to building an airplane in flight as we go forward, and because of the dynamic nature of this environment, we are continually learning every day as we go forward. So when we show up to these formations that we're currently building, we are executing what we call DE&P, demonstration, experimentation, and prototyping. So we're taking, in partnership with industry and our material developers, we are getting kit in the hands of our soldiers in these formations so they can start getting reps and informing what we're doing as we're building it. So that's how we're doing it at a high level. Let me ask Mr. May from a capabilities development standpoint to add a little bit to that, and then I'll have my other panel members address it as well.
Well, absolutely support what General Hersey said, and to follow up with Sydney, bad on the Army for trying to get after it. I think it is phenomenal that we are stepping forward and saying this is kind of an unknown area. We don't have all the answers. It's not going to be paralysis by analysis, but we're going to learn by doing. We're going to put some formations out there. We're going to run some cycles. We're going to see what works, what doesn't work, and we're going to adjust on the fly. American ingenuity, the adaptive philosophy of figuring it out as quickly as possible so that we can maintain a competitive advantage against our adversary, is how we're going to win the next war. And that's exactly what we're doing. So I talked to you about the I2Qs and the work that we're doing at the BCT level with 2-2 Striker. Experimentation and demonstration. We took a unit. We gave them some EW personnel. We took some pre-prototype kit. We brought them out to the field and we said, we want you to play with it. Let's try some different formations. Let's try some different ways to do connectivity and geolocation. Let's see what works, what doesn't work. Took a lot of notes, came back, played around with it in the lab, and now we're doing in mod and sim with something similar where we don't have to have all the soldiers out there at all one time. All those lessons learned are going into us validating the concept of operations and helping us drive the material requirement so that when we do come out and ask industry to produce something, we've got a 90% solution. I think it's a great model. It's not perfect, but it does allow us to move much more quickly in this space.
Yeah, so building a plane in flight is an okay thing. What you don't want, and what the GAO report I think was talking about, is you don't want to hear the infamous words of Woody to Buzz Lightyear. That's not flying, that's falling with style. And so I'll tell you that we have no problem assessing the soldiers that we need to fill those organizations. Within about 6 weeks, the United States Army Recruiting Command was able to go from not having 17 Echoes come in as E1 to having them already loaded to go to basic training to fill the course that started last Monday. There is a drive within this generation to serve, and when they see that they can be part of a great thing, they're wanting to do that. So we have no lack of adequate Americans that want to join the Army and do that. The training is another piece that will continue to work. It is probably exactly wrong, but it's mostly right. And it will always be that way in this technology. You want to work like a sinusoidal wave that we are making those left and right changes based on the operational force so we stay on target. What we're looking at is the Army's ability to do the demonstrations and the experimentation with various kit to make sure that when we man, train, and equip, we equip them with the most lethal and deadly force that we can to be able to ensure that our soldiers have what they need when they're in combat. So although you'll see low numbers in percentages, we're working very closely with the Department of Army and their force management, and they have not enabled those units to 100%. So we're being very cautious to turn just enough of the unit on to then bring in and build a capability, do experimentation, demonstration, make adjustments before we then increase capacity to the next level. So we're kind of buying down a lot of risk. We're buying down a lot of concern by doing it this way. We're moving fast, but we're being very, very cautious in the way that we do it. And we have a lot of great partners as well. So I'll leave you with this, that being a small school and a small branch, we're not opposed to borrowing other services capabilities. And so one of the big folks that we have that's worked very heavily on electronic warfare curriculum is a former Navy chief who was out at their school to make sure that he took all the lessons learned. By doing that, we've pretty much started where the Navy's at and some of their lessons learned and pivoted from that, and we'll continue to do that. But thank you for that question.
Anything to add? Okay.
Hey, sir, can I throw one other?
We are not. Those are trained at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
General Hersey, may I make one more comment
Sure.
on this? So back in 2012, I was at U.S. Cyber Command, and I had the pleasure of briefing General Alexander on a pilot, the first National Mission Force team. And I was part of the team that had to come up with the concept of what this was supposed to look like. And we really didn't have a whole lot of data to go after. So we put it out on a whiteboard, came up with a 64-person construct, we briefed him, and he said, go forth and build it. Go forth and build it, test it, see if it works. Within a couple of months, we actually had a 133 team construct that was going on. There wasn't a tremendous amount of analysis behind those teams at the time, but the need was there. The need to defend the nation against cyber attacks, the need to be able to project power through cyberspace. And General Alexander's philosophy was, as we move forward. Those teams existed in that current framework of 64 persons and 39 persons for about 4 or 5 years, and they're just now making slight modifications. But the understanding was that we were going to learn, and then we will modify as necessary. And I think that model today, as we apply it to multi-domain operations, is valid.
Thank you. Next question, please. Please take that long walk up here.
Oh, paratrooper, I can definitely walk 15 feet. Question is probably for Mr. May. I'm from Glenn Anderson, BAE Systems. How are you doing your contracting or putting the word out on what type of technologies you need? Do you use BAAs? Do you use RFPs? Is there a consortium? I primarily represent Fast Labs, which is the R&D sector for BAE. So we go after DARPA programs, IARPA, ONR. So we're looking for ways to get into the Army cyber to try to do the research and development that you may need for things that are in the future. And I just wish you would comment on that, whether it's a BAA or RFP. Thank you, sir.
Sure. So there's a couple different ways we get the message out as to what we're looking at from a requirements perspective. One of the ways, of course, is TechNet, and each one of our capabilities managers had time within the calendar over the next 3 days to talk specifically about their portfolio. TradeOut capability manager cyber briefed yesterday, and he walked through his 4 buckets: offensive cyber, defensive cyber, persistent cyber training environment, and cyber SU, and then all the specific requirements that fall within each one of those buckets. So we have 2 signal portfolios, a cyber portfolio, and EW portfolio that will all be talked at during TechNet. And industry partners have the opportunity to come up and talk to those capability managers on any specifics on what we're looking at for future requirements. Our Battle Lab is also briefing. They talked yesterday, and I think they have about a half a day tomorrow to talk about CyberQuest. And we put out a broad area announcement specifically on the technologies for signal, cyber, and electronic warfare that we're looking for to bring in and prototype to help inform our future requirements. Lastly, the PMs are going to be here tomorrow, our project managers that team with us. We have IEW&S, STRI, EIS, and C3T, I think, are all going to be here tomorrow and probably tonight at the reception. They're the ones who actually put out the RFPs that industry would then address, if that helps.
So let me throw out a question, because we're talking a lot about electronic warfare and cyberspace operations, but very interested in the multi-domain transformation of the signal regiment to be able to meet this emerging mission set. So we have come up with the construct of our expeditionary signal battalions enhanced. So what I want to ask my chief of signal is, how do I get one of those, and what is it?
I don't know, sir. How do you get one? No. So Expeditionary Signal Battalion Enhanced. So what we've done over the last year is take one of our Expeditionary Signal Battalions and, no kidding, change it from the bottom up. So what is it? It is a brand new organization created out of an old. So it is lighter, leaner, faster, more mobile. It provides more capability with less footprint. And what do I mean by that? So current construct in an ESB is about 30 points of presence. If you put it in a points of presence perspective, the new ESB-E is 48 points of presence with less people. So we're taking a structure north of 400. We're down around 375. We took about an 8 or 9 person team and made it a 4-person team. And now you can go from 4-person team, small kit, you can match those together and create large kits. Small kit is, 10 user or less. Large kit, CJTF, medium kit, somewhere in between. I shouldn't say that. All 3 bands. But multi-transport. So we're talking 4G, we're talking satellite, we're talking line of sight, all provided by a 4-person team and scalable as needed. So what was 9 people, 3 trucks, and 3 trailers is now 4 people and 2 trucks. So that is what it is. 50th Signal Battalion is the first. They're at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. They just finished up a year-long pilot. We looked at multiple sets of kit over that year. Now the PEOs are getting to work on what the way forward is. So more to follow. How do I get one? Be patient. So it's coming to a theater near you. There are 25 Expeditionary Signal Battalions in the Army across all 3 compos, active duty, Guard, Reserve. Sooner or later, we're going to get to those ESBs. Having said that, as we look at the signal structure for the future, some ESBs might not exist in the future based on the increased capability that we're growing inside the ESBE. But what I would ask is be patient. We do have you on the map. We are set to start converting ESBs to ESBEs in 2020 at the rate right now of about 3 per year. So no decisions have been made on who's next, but we are in the throes of moving out and making progress on that.
All right, thank you, Chris. Next question, please. Sir.
Just as a non-engineer, let me get that math right. 25 ESBEs converting 3 per year starting in 2020, so you are done by the 2028 deadline for MDO, but not before. So which is by Army standards is very fast, but by commercial world standards is very slow.
So yes, we will be on timeline, and as you stated, by our standards, moving very rapidly. And once again, not all will get converted. There will be some that will convert to fill other gaps in our signal structure. So we will work through that from a Compo 1, active duty, Guard, and Reserve as we move forward towards 2028.
So some of them become other kinds of units or new kinds of units?
Yes. He asked, some will become other kinds of units or new in the future, and the answer is yes.
Next question, please.
I like this side of the room.
All right, I got one.
Oh, man.
So, Todd, I know we do a lot of community outreach from the Cyber Center of Excellence. So what are some ways that you support STEM education at the Cyber School?
So, let me start this way. So I give high credit to the local community here. So I spent a lot of my years with my children growing up overseas, and so they went to Department of Defense schools. So when we came here, and the decision was made that Army Cyber Command was coming here, and that the Signal Center of Excellence would transform to the Cyber Center of Excellence, and the Cyber School would be stood up here, the local community all came together and said, hey, we have an opportunity. And it's not just an opportunity for ourselves, but we have an opportunity to contribute to that. And so multiple schools across multiple counties, to include multiple state lines, so this wasn't just Georgia, this was South Carolina, all came together and they formed this thing called the Alliance for Cybersecurity Education. Now, I thought that was just normal, that schools work with one another. And so, because why wouldn't I? I've been overseas for the last 15 years. But as I started to talk to them, I found out that that's not how it happens. Even within the same county, schools sometimes feel that they're competing with one another. But the local area was able to see beyond that and know that a rising tide lifts all ships. And so they stood up really quick, and they turned to the Cyber Center of Excellence. They turned to Fort Gordon. Lots of partners within the Cyber Center of Excellence, within other unnamed agencies on Fort Gordon and other contributors, to say, how are we going to pull this together, and let's look at growing the workforce here. So it is great that Army Cyber Command is going to come here, and it is great that they're going to bring some people with them, and that is going to help seed and do great things for the area. But there's a lot of great people in the central Savannah River area. There's a lot of great people here that, if given the opportunity, would be able to rise to the challenge. So they got started within the high schools very quickly. It was the post-secondary schools. If I listed one or two, I would forget some, and I don't want to do that. But a number of colleges and universities all chipped in and came together. And so we put together a pathway for high school students. What is happening now, and I kind of had to step away once all that got approved and know, hey, it's easy to make a plan. A plan is just a coordinated place to begin to deviate from. Enacting the plan, that's the hard part. How do you get the resources to the schools to be able to do that? How do you get the teachers that have the acumen to be able to do that? And so I stepped away for a little while, and as I watched it and have had the opportunity to be able to come and see what they're doing again, not only has that blossomed, but now we're starting to see local industry, an industry that's moving here, saying, I want to be a part of that. So we want to challenge industry to look at interns. This is your next workforce. These are folks that you get the ability to be able to help shape, and they will fill your critical positions in the future. We want to help to be a part of that. Department of Defense has certain things that we can step beyond and certain that we can't. And so we do some marketing. We do have our recruiters and go out there. But we also did an adopt-a-school program where a lot of the units on Fort Gordon are adopting them. I'll kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, maybe a little too early to announce, but I'm going to go ahead and, this is me, what are they going to do? So at the next AFCEA event, the certs, we're going to have another capture the flag. And having got approval for General Hersey, the way that we're going to do that is we're looking for post-secondary institutions in other organizations that have adult skill sets to be able to do cybersecurity that they will get, and we'll link up with the ACE, the Alliance for Cybersecurity Education, to find high schools that want to have their students form a team for a capture the flag during certs, and then we will form relationships with them and mentor those teams. That's what certs is all about. How are we reaching back and building the bench? And so, sir, we're all on board, of course. We have a fence line, but we don't see any borders between us and the community partners. And I'm just very privileged and proud to be a part of that, sir.
Thank you, Tom. Question. Next question.
So,
Sir,
Todd, thank you for that. Bob Wood from AFCEA. Yes, we will be in this place in January 14 to 16 for the Cyber Education Research and Training Symposium. We're very excited about this southeastern United States focus. It can be all over focused. But we're taking steps forward to build the ecosystem that supports cyber education and workforce development. I want to ask a question from that. And again, January will be the event. The education model, we have to keep the standards high, keep up with technologies, and get throughput. How is the institution here at Fort Gordon looking at the education model for cyber education in particular, as it may be more online, more distributed, more virtual? I'm just interested in the innovation going on, or that is needed for the education model that we're using instead of a set piece formula.
So, sir, thank you for the question. So I'd actually like to address that from both perspectives. So we are continuing to innovate and adapt our education models in cyber, but we've also done a lot of work with the signal training to really make a more multifunctional soldier coming out. So I want to let each of the schools talk about some of the things that they're doing specifically to revamp the way we're doing education and training. So Chris, please.
So, sir, thanks for the question. I would tell you it's not a one or the other game anymore. So all of our labs we're setting up now are both hands-on and virtual. So foundational training for the Signal School, the lab we have is 16 hardwired stations and 16 virtual stations, and the class swaps, right? So 16 students are actually physically messing with a box, a router, a switch, a printer, a computer. On the other side of the room, they're using all virtual training to get after the same task. They're actually making Cat5 cables virtually. And then on the other side of the room, they're actually making a physical Cat5 cable. So we're meshing the two kind of worlds, whether it's old school and new school, but the day is gone where you can do one or the other. So that's how we're getting after it. I would tell you this generation, you got to challenge them. They are eager. They're eager to serve, as Mr. May and Mr. Boudreau talked about. It's how do you reach them? And so they're challenging us every day. What we find is there's a group in every class that is at the top, and all of a sudden you got 4 more assistant instructors who are helping their classmates along. So the days are gone where it's just 4 instructors standing at a podium, death by order. It's all hands-on now, both virtual and physical, and I think it will make a difference in the future.
Thank you, Chris. Todd?
Yes, sir. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So we have a provisional new area of concentration for officers that is up for review. It'll be a 17 Delta. They're what we call capability or tool developers. So they're hardcore coders. We have Warrant Officer MOS, so 170 Delta is going to be very much like that. The Warrant Officer MOS has a very long training pipeline. We're looking at them, we're going to do a model sort of like aviation does where we can actually bring them off the street. For the officers, it's much shorter. And so the first question that we got when we sent that forward to our higher headquarters is, if they're both the same thing, if you go to Fort Rucker, the courses are the same lengths. Why is it different for officer as opposed to warrant officer? Well, because the officers, we're expecting academia to help us with that. We will be looking at those hardcore skills and programming languages, and then we will look to academia for where the universities that specialize in them, C++, Python, Perl, all of that. That we have a source that can supply that, we're not going to replicate that. So their course will be much shorter because we will be assessing them from that. So that's one piece. Another piece is, as we get others that come in through a higher level of STEM within academia, there's 2 ways you can address that. One is if they already have that block of instruction, why don't you just move them on, which always sounds real good. You think about it, like a college education, but the problem is it's not a bunch of courses. This is one thing for us. So if you took English, or if you took History 101 and you knew one period of history real rest, you have to take the course. You don't get to opt out of the course. So we also find that what they know is not sequential in the course. So what we're doing instead is, how do we make a place for those folks that come in from their high school or from their college environment and allow the training to go deeper? So if on training day 2 of a 5-day block, they have already achieved the basic requirements, while there for the other 3 days, we have within our future persistent training environment and our current virtual training area the ability for them to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And then how do we tag and catalog that individual has that skill set? So that's another thing that we're watching, that we're getting folks that, as General Eubank said, some of these folks can teach the class. And we have done that as well, co-opt them. Guess what, Lieutenant, you're going to teach this block, because there's other leadership things that they get. The last thing I'll leave you with is there's a lot of work going on in training ranges and the ability for folks to do this when they're not on mission, not working. That's what this skill set, that's what this skilled workforce needs. This is an ever-changing environment, and I liken it sort of like linguists. I don't know if you are a linguist or know anyone that's a linguist, but if you ask them how they maintain their proficiency, it's normally a lower percentage based on their normal job. What they do is they subscribe to periodicals, they go to other places so that they stay conversant in that language. How much more here? It's not just atrophy from not doing, it's technology continues to roll. And so when they're not on mission, when they're not in your job site, when they're not producing for you, how do we enable them to get to continue to be didactic learners, that they're self-learners, and they can continue to play, experiment, and learn? And then how do we capture that in the things that they do to be able to turn that back to academia within their labs and so forth? So lots of great things happening with that last show. Appreciate that question, sir.
So I'll tie a little bit of what both General Eubank and Mr. Boudreau talked about, and the way we're transforming really to more of an education than a training model, is really looking at outcomes-based education versus task condition standards, which is traditionally the way the Army looks at something. So at the end of the day, so we need someone to be able to do their job in multiple environments without necessarily having to refer to a checklist. And the way that we're doing foundational training in the signal regiment is starting that transformation with the signal corps, and we have already been doing that to a large degree with the cyber branch. So that's the other kind of fundamental change of approach that we're doing at the Cyber Center of Excellence. So let me hit the technology piece for a second, and I'll give this question to Mr. May. So Dave, from your perspective as a CDID director, not as my advisor, but as a CDID director, what do you see as the most our most challenging technical pieces to overcome or to deal with?
Thank you for that question, sir. Appreciate it. We are a technologically based organization. Everything we do and touch is technology, TechNet, right? If I were to venture to guess, I would say everybody in this room has a cell phone in their pocket or in their car, yes? And I'm also going to guess that a good chunk of you are parents. So if you were to reach into your pocket and pull out an iPhone 6, where your kids scold you, would you say, hey, that's not the latest tech? What's going on, Mom, Dad? That's not working out for me. And oh, by the way, I need the iPhone 10X or whatever, the Galaxy S10. We have a challenge in our business line of staying relevant. So how do we create capabilities today that are relevant to the soldiers today, but are agile and flexible enough to support operations in the future? The Army does not have an unlimited budget to continue to refine and change technology every 2 to 3 years. So we have to look at ways in which we can carry that life cycle a little longer. How does industry help? Well, I'll give you some thoughts. They're not necessarily universal signal cyber EW, but they're things to consider. Software defined. You've heard about software defined radios, right? So we can change the guts of the radio through zeros and ones to modify how waveforms and other approaches that allow us to extend the life of the radio. That applies across other technologies as well. Processors that are easily exchanged and are at low cost, because processing power is increasingly important as we look at the modern age and the increasing bandwidth demands on our systems. Open architecture. Smart sensors. Small form factor. The smaller, the lighter, the better for the Army. Better for the soldier who has to put it in his man pack. Less weight on a vehicle. Very important. Smart sensors that do most of the processing on the front end so that we reduce bandwidth requirements on the network. There are always increasing bandwidth requirements. And it's interesting, if you talk through all the different gaps that we have in the Army, every time somebody comes up with a new solution, there's an additional bandwidth requirement for the Signal Corps to deal with. So processing on the front end. Anytime you can reduce power through an automated solution, it's something we want to talk to industry about. So if you can reduce the amount of time a soldier has to do analysis by automating that system, that is something we want to talk to you about each and every day. It's extremely important, and it's part of almost everything we address today is how do we reduce sensor to shooter, and that is by taking the human out of the loop in many cases.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. May. Next question, please. Sir.
So, sticking on the conversation about relevancy. What's the plan on keeping POIs, programs of instruction, relevant to what's currently going on out there? In a prior life, I was on the staff of the School of Information Technology, and every year or 2 years we'd have a CTSSB to figure out what would go into POI. That seems like that's not the right way to do things, just because speed is important now. So how do we keep those POIs relevant on a continuous basis?
Great question. Appreciate the question. So I got my two. I have my deputy commandant and my commandant here. This is their live. So Chris, I'll let you go first.
So First, I'd like to say that all POIs are up to date and relevant at this point. So, having said that, I think the CTSSB process is a valid process that's needed because it takes operational folks, brings them into the schoolhouse to have a conversation about what we should be doing. Having said that, it's got to be done at a more rapid pace. And I'm not going to steal Todd's thunder, but they have cracked the code on this, no pun intended. They've cracked the code on this, and what we're trying to do as a signal school is follow them and then get the rest of the TRADOC enterprise to understand how we more rapidly get after training development to keep pace with technology. And I'll stop there and let Todd pick it up.
Yeah, so General Hersey touched on a couple of things. He talked about us moving to outcomes-based training, and when we did that, it changed the paradigm somewhat of programs of instruction, because now your lessons plans can change a lot more as long as that's the same outcome that we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to do is balance the rigor of the Trade-Ocean processes so that it's just not, you open the gate and then everything falls out. But take some of the work out of it. So a program of instruction as a document for the Army really does one important thing. It justifies resources, justifies the number of people, classrooms, the items that you need, and all of that. Your lessons plans can change sometimes 100% and it not change the resourcing requirement. So that's one of the things that we're working with TRADOC. Instead of there being some magical number, if you change more than 30% of the lesson plan, now you need to update that. Well, it's not, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. And so why would I put folks to work on that when we're trying to maintain this? Another one is looking at how we prioritize it. So I'll give you an example. So we have a direct commissioning course pilot program that we're running for the Army for cyber. And for that, we need a program of instruction. Now, when we bring these people in with exquisite skills, because we've asked the operational force, what are some things that we're just not likely to build a bench? Because you need one or two of these folks, and so the Army just doesn't work well at producing that. Instead, we'll go out and we'll find individuals that have the skill sets already. We'll bring them through a very rigorous selection process. I think there were well over 400 that got whittled down to about 50, that through interviews comes down to about 5 or 6 that get interviewed. And then we're on 4 individuals that are in the operational force and 3 that are in training, 2.5 years. So it works through that. Now, as we bring them in, they go through the direct commissioning course at Fort Benning. So it's kind of like an OCS kind of thing. And then they come to us. And the thing that we're not going to do is put them through our long course, because we brought them in because of the skills they had. So we put them through the Common Core portion only, and then they go straight out to the force. Now, we know that we're going to do maybe 5 to 8 a year. So you would need to have a program of instruction for these 5 to 8 a year that we're never going to stand up their own course. They're going to fall into a bullet course that's already happening. And so basically, I'm going to have to develop a program of instruction that earns me no resources. That's like eating celery. It's negative calories, right? And so it is looking at and working back with TRADOC and saying, how do we put these things in a proper perspective to say, these are important because they have resourcing implications. I think it's good that we would be, have to maintain those, as General Eubank said. There's a timeline. Whether you change it or not, it should be looked at, just the rigor of re-looking that. But if you're making lots of changes below the resourcing level, the cyber school has been doing that. Our POI, our lessons plans, normally change from one course to another, and it does not make us go back to doing the program of instruction. Now, the TRADOC system's not set up for that. So when they came down to do our accreditation inspection, there were certain things on the checklist that they said, we have to take points off because of this. Well, what is that? Well, the student took a test, and so in their records you put their score plus the task that they performed. But we don't have tasks. We're outcome-based. I know, but we have to take points away. And so, okay, got it. We still passed our accreditation. So now we owe it to TRADOC as we learn this at the Cyber Center of Excellence between the two schools to say, as other TRADOC schools want to apply this, how do we help you build the rigor that's in the task-based so we can have the same rigor in the outcomes-based, but take some of the bureaucracy and those things out and really get after resourcing and the ability to train our folks. So thank you for that question.
Okay, next question, please. Good questions. All right, I got one. So, Chris, I touched on it, but in your vision, what do you see as a multifunctional signal soldier?
Different from today. So right now, the Signal Regiment has 17 enlisted military occupational skills. 17. We're very stovepiped. We have an individual that does satellite. We have an individual that does help desk. We have an individual that does tactical radios. So what we're doing right now is this signal soldier for multi-domain operations is going to be multifaceted, multidisciplined. So how are we doing that? We're taking 17 MOSs and moving it to 7. One of those 7 is going to be a Sergeant Major. One's going to be a specialty MOS for cybersecurity. One's going to be a specialty MOS for spectrum management. The other 4 are going to be the core MOSs that we need to solve signal problems for the warfighter every day. And they're going to be grouped in 2 categories: signal operations and information operations. So that's where we're headed. We're going to take 17 career management field MOSs and make them 7, and they are going to solve problems for us every given day. But we have to do that. The comment from the warfighter is, I turn around and ask a signal soldier for help, and more times than not, they look at me and go, hey, sir, I'd love to, but I don't do that. I just do satellites. So the signal soldier of the future is going to be able to turn around and say, sir, I got it. I'm going to solve your problem, and when I get to a point where I can't, I know who can. So what I would tell you is, doing this for 28 years, this isn't anything new across the force today. We cross-train all of our signal soldiers in every unit today. We're just formalizing it. So that's how we're going to get after the multi-domain operations from a personnel perspective. We are phase 1 complete, which takes us down to 14 MOSs, which will go into effect in 2022. Phase 2 is at TRADOC, and should hit the Pentagon the September timeframe, which takes us down to 10. And then we were successful in getting all of our visual information systems MOSs, the folks who do photography and video and repair. We have now moved them to the Public Affairs Corps in the Army, and that will take effect in the next 3 years as well. That's how we're going to get down to our 7 MOSs and how we get after multi-domain operations.
Thanks, Chris. So we have time for one more question. Please.
Mike Warlick, I've really enjoyed this session this afternoon, sir, first of all. It's been really enlightening. But as I'm sitting here listening to this, I'm thinking about the joint forces at the same time. So I also think of the network modernization program, how that ties into what you're doing. But how do you see working some of these initiatives, or are you in coordination with some of the joint services to be sure that we're tracking to make a whole force concept?
So little known fact is we do a majority of training for the other services right here at Fort Gordon when it comes to certain IT aspects. So all your Marines who need satellite training come to Fort Gordon. A good chunk of your Air Force satellite operators come to Fort Gordon. So interestingly enough, had a conversation with the commander of the Marine Comm School out at 29 Palms, and we're now going to have a conversation on how we start to merge even more. Met with an Air Force individual this morning after my talk on the regiment, and we're now having a conversation about how we get more connected. I think we're more connected than people believe. I think the challenge moving forward will be, as we speed up our acquisition process on the Army side of the house with the network CFT, as Mr. May has described, it's how do we ensure that we don't leave our joint partners behind. And then that will also bleed over into the coalition world as we move forward into 2028. But I think we're in a better place than most of us think we are. It's just a matter of ensuring we don't create a gap as we start to close a gap.
Thanks. And I'm gonna jump in on the cyber because I used to be the cyber commandant, and I know Mr. Boudreau wants to talk about this. But so from the cyber side, and we have our Cybercom J7 here with us. When Cyber Command designed the cyber mission forces, they designed all those outcomes, those task condition standards, and the skill sets from a joint perspective, and then charged the services to build the cyber mission teams. So being the first of the services to actually build a branch and build a school from the ground up, we took that joint standard and constructed the curriculum for the cyber school from that, and we're doing the same thing, same approach with electronic warfare. So any service can send their person to our training, and then go to any team and complete their mission within standard. And there's a process within our higher command to compensate for the funding and instructional requirements for that course load. So my message out to everyone is we want your business here at Fort Gordon in the Cyber Center of Excellence if you've got joint service training requirements. The other piece is the coalition. The coalition training. So we ran our first course last year with the Australian Defence Forces and on the defensive course. So we're looking to expand on the cyber operations side as well. We've been doing it with the Signal Regiment for quite some time to bring our coalition folks in there, and we actually have several coalition officers on our staff at the Cyber Center of Excellence. So let me close out with that. Thank you all for your time and attendance today. Thank you, AFCEA, for putting on this event. Our industry partners out there, we need your help. We need your ideas. We need your innovation. And to our partners in the media, help us get the word out about what's going on here in the Augusta Fort Gordon area. Because we think we're doing a lot of great stuff here. Thank you all for the teamwork. Have a great day.